Hello, my name is Christopher, and we will be discussing and analyzing the biblical painting of Judith slaying Holofernes by Artemesia Gentileschi, who is a 17th century Baroque artist. In fact, she will be one of the first female artists to be widely known and has also worked in Rome, Naples, and Florence. And while she paints multiple portraits of Judith, we'll be primarily focused on her 1612 to 13 painting of Judith slaying Holofernes. We'll be doing a slight comparison by Caravaggio, who was also an inspiration to Artemesia for this painting. We'll also be discussing its significance to the Baroque era through its dramatic lighting, dynamic tension, and composition, its depiction of female empowerment and feminism that are shaped by the artist's historical context and artistic choices. During the 1600s, women were allowed to study in the academy like men were. So unfortunately, this meant that they couldn't study the nude anatomy of the human body, which is also an essential part of art history. In fact, most women who could paint were typically trained through a family member or some form of male relative. Artemesia trained with her father, who was also an artist that studied and was an apprentice to Caravaggio. His name was Orazio Gentileschi, and despite laws that limited and prohibited women from being able to study under the academy, Gentileschi was able to not only train under her father, but on top of that became one of the most successful artists in her time, and even to this day. The biblical story of Judith goes as follows. The Assyrian general Holofernes was going to invade the city where Judith resides, also known as Bethulia. To prevent the invasion, Judith seduced Holofernes and got him drunk and decapitated him with the help of her maid. When breaking down the context of the painting, Holofernes' hands are painted almost as if they have the potential to fight off Judith and her maid. And despite his hands being bigger than the maid's face, Judith is drawn exhibiting great female strength, emphasizing a strong female power compared to earlier versions. While she is not the only artist to paint the biblical scene, such as Caravaggio's version that has inspired this painting and has a more stoic version of Judith, her version depicts a more gory, dramatic, and intense realism that was well known during the Baroque period. What is fascinating about Gentileschi's version is the composition and the movement of the characters. The close, tight composition increases drama, and we can see the physical power struggle between Judith, her maid, and Holofernes. Furthermore, the use of the lighting and color creates a more dramatic lighting. The strong contrasts between light and dark allows the viewer to focus on the scene at hand. In fact, the rich colors and the shadows create tension in the body language and clothing. Judith is seen with a bright yellow dress that is rolled past her sleeves, showing that she is serious about what she is doing. In fact, we can see that this is her facial expression that depicts a more determined character, and the red colors of the sheets and the blood tell us that Holofernes' death was one of a passionate killing. In fact, such a realistic depiction of Judith's efforts and strength shifts the viewer's focus from Judith and her maid directly to the beheading of Holofernes, forcing the viewer to witness the violent and gory event. As I mentioned before, Caravaggio, who trained Artemesia's father in the arts, painted his own version of Judith in 1599, which later inspired Artemesia to paint her own version in 1612. The sheer focus was to showcase an intense emotional drama, realism, and high-stakes violence, marking a pivotal change from a static Renaissance style to a more dynamic and theatrical one. Yet, the depictions between both Caravaggio and Gentileschi are vastly different in storytelling. Explicit gore and physical movement, and the connection between Judith and her maid. Offhand, we can see the graphic details between both paintings. Gentileschi's depicts more dynamic characters. As mentioned before, Judith has movement that takes realism to the next level. We can see her determination to behead Holofernes through the roll of her sleeves, the twist of her arms as she swings the sword, and the grit expression of using immense force. In contrast to Gentileschi's, Caravaggio depicts Judith as more stoic, confused, and concerned, yet she's committed to a great act of courage to save her people. We can even tell that the maids play a different role. Gentileschi's version, the women appear stronger and more active, emphasizing on teamwork between Judith and her maid. Additionally, the maid appears younger, actively holding down the general. In Caravaggio's, we can see that the maid is old, with her participation limited to just acting as a catcher, waiting for the deed to be done, almost as if she's waiting to perhaps capture his head as it falls off. Although both versions capture women in a power position, Gentileschi's introduces a more realistic depiction of female brutality and agency, and it changes the emotional tone and message of the story. The story that Judith is not just swinging a sword and remaining composed. She is a woman who shows immense grit and dedication, taking matters into her own hands. And while we can agree that the ideology of feminism is a modern construct and was non-existent during the 17th century, we cannot deny that Artemesia's depiction of Judith showcasing empowered women takes on the role that was heavily affiliated with men. This isn't another general or soldier killing the general. It's a woman who is just as powerful, determined, and capable, remaining relevant, inspirational, and symbolic of female resilience and success. Because she's able to paint such determination and fundamental elements of what makes a woman powerful, Gentileschi's lasting influence as a female artist is the main reason why this paint not only remains relevant today, but she remains relevant today. Additionally, it is noted that the reason because the clothing, the weapons, and the background details enhance the realism are all due to the fact that she is using her own personal experience and her own trauma to create a powerful image of Judith. Thus, it combines artistic mastery with a bold portrayal of female strength that continues to resonate today.